Hey, I see a story in here. This time around, I have one of the fresher faces in the SE2 world, Mixu. In a world dominated by MOBAs, Battle Royale, and FPS games, this young guy is one of the few that chose to call the StarCraft community home. And I find that fascinating. If you've been enjoying my work, drop a like, comment down below, and consider getting subscribed. That being said, let's jump in to my word with Mixu. So, Mixu, thanks so much for taking the time today, man. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, you're welcome. Also, we talked about it already at the Stormstory Cup, and I was, I mean, to be fair, I don't usually do stuff like this, like interviews, so it's kind of a first for me. Because usually it's always related to a tournament, like after the match or
Yeah.
post-match interview. There's a bit of a different environment, but I was kind of looking forward to it anyway.
For sure. No, I'm happy to host you, man. I think you're part of a really interesting I don't know what to call it, generation or group of people that have entered this StarCraft community over the last like 5 6 years. And I think it's incredibly interesting because number one, there's a lot of fans. I think there's way more fans that have gotten into StarCraft, post 2017 than most people realize. Especially post 2015 with the move to free to play. So yeah, I think I really am interested in folks like yourself, right? Who like maybe because there are people probably who got into StarCraft in 2011 that saw it as an opportunity to get in the biggest game and make a bunch of money and become esports famous or whatever. But that's obviously not the motivation for somebody who started dedicating tons of time into StarCraft within the last few years, right? It has to be predicated on a lot more of a love for the game and a desire to improve, and just participating in the community. I guess the question that's interesting to me is how'd you get first involved with StarCraft? What made you get into StarCraft?
When I first got into StarCraft 2 was, I already knew about it. I already played a little bit in HOTS and Wings, but that was like mostly arcade games, and I maybe reached gold in one or once, but it was like less than 100 games on my account at that point. But when I first really got into StarCraft 2 was at Assembly Summer 2017, when there was a Nordic Championship there, and it was Snoot against Namshar in the final. And I talked with Snoot, and I also talked with Zugeliang, and some of the random Finnish players who were also in the BYOC. Well, I say random. Obviously, some of them are my friends now, but
At the
at
time?
that point, they
Yeah.
were like random people. I just looked for them in the
For sure.
BYOC area. Always for like maybe after I was like 13. Ever since then, I've been really social, especially um, relatively to how social you maybe should be at when you go up to random people at events. So those lands, or especially that land, was the one when I first really got into it. And I talked with Snoot after his match, and he was really nice. I think I asked him something about Hyderling Bane, and then I just asked random questions from the other people there too, and played. I started playing the Wings campaign there on brutal difficulty at that point. That's the one thing I remember, and I think I was platinum at that point.
You said that was Assembly 2017.
Yeah, Assembly Summer 2017, the same one that they had hosted the Asus ROG 2019 one, the Stats one, and then some of the old ones, like the one that Dimaga won. But that one was the winter one, but Dimaga won one of those in 2011, and then they ran a lot of them with people like Total Biscuit and others casting.
Yeah, yeah, the Aces RG NorthCon events and stuff like that. Those were awesome. The one that comes to mind for me is probably the Jadong versus Scarlet finals. That was definitely an interesting one. At least Jadong's first premier victory in StarCraft 2, I think. Um, but anyhow, so that's pretty cool. It's nice that you were able to get exposed. You were 15 at that time, right? 2017 or something like that.
Yeah, probably. I think so.
Yeah, that makes sense. So that's awesome. Yeah, it's Snoot. I remember being a super nice guy. I got the opportunity to chat with him a little bit in the past as well. So it makes sense to me that he'd be somebody who'd really be open and welcoming to a conversation with somebody like yourself, who at the time obviously nobody knew, right? You're really new to the scene.
Yeah.
Have you ever been like really into any other games, like any other communities that you've been invested in?
I've already been in the assembly circles for a while. Like my dad used to bring me to those events ever since I was really young. So I already saw StarCraft 2 at a HSROG in like 2012, but I saw Mutas and I saw a lava map, and that's all I remember about that. So I didn't even realize that there were like a ton of players there because I only remember seeing the small stage or whatnot. So I forgot what the initial question was. Sorry.
Oh yeah, no, it's okay. It was just like, have you ever been sort of very dedicated or involved in any other gaming communities outside of
Any other
StarCraft 2?
game? Well, tournament wise, I've only played the random small RTS that pop up, but um, I obviously played a lot of CS with some of my friends. Never like actually like practicing high level strats or anything, but we played some of the BYCs in some random tournaments like Overwatch at one point, and so I've been invested in a couple of different games, but not really competitively. I also played a lot of League of Legends at one point, but that was also before I really started to understand how the competitive side works.
You played in some AoE 4 events, right? But those were like pretty
Yeah.
casual, or?
No, there I definitely tried, but I didn't feel like the pacing was for me. At least, especially at the start, it was like you could wall up you could wall your opponent into his own base, and it was absolutely crazy. It's like on some of those maps. I remember I lost a game where he walled me into my base on a map with only 2 choke points as the entrances into your base, and I just couldn't get out. And before he won the game through capturing one of the points in the middle, and I mean that's just not what I'm really looking for. Like I feel like my strengths in StarCraft 2 are probably just micro and just being active and just understanding the tempo of the game. And I was just not in the game in AoE4, so I just didn't feel at home necessarily.
No, that makes sense. Yeah, it's obviously a very different game. I also agree. I think that the biggest fundamental problem is the pacing. Um, at least for StarCraft 2 players, I think it just feels very, very different. Um, so, what made you end up choosing Zerg as your main race?
I just thought they looked cool. At this point, if I had to go just by the looks, I would probably pick Terran. But at that point, I just liked Zerg because they looked a little bit unique. And I don't know, like they were on the cover art of HOTS and the trailer and everything, so probably because of that.
Yeah, the HOTS trailer is I would argue probably the best one. It's a really good one. Although I like the Legacy of the Void one a lot too. Yeah,
Yeah,
they're all pretty good. But
I already started kind of playing as Zerg at that point, but there was actually in 2014, I forgot this one, but in Assembly Winter 2014, there was one Protoss player sitting across the like in the BYC area, how you have the computers.
yeah.
So across the desk and or across the table is a better way to put it. And he helped me play some 4-gate or 8-gate or something, and I just played that for a couple games at Protoss. So I guess my first competitive experience was with Protoss, but that was like just the ladder. And but he was, I think, a Masters player, so like middle of the pack in Finland
Yeah.
at that point. At that point, there were also a lot more Finnish like regular competitive players. Like Elfie was still playing, Velma was still playing, I think.
Yeah. Yeah. The Finnish
Oh,
scene has always
yeah,
had like pretty good representation. I feel relative to some of the other, because like a relatively small population, but produce a decent number of good players. Obviously, Serral being one of the standouts, but Elfie and Wellmu and stuff like that were formidable competitors. During that time period. Um, but okay, so why do you think you ended up dedicating so much time to StarCraft at a point when a lot of people viewed it as like past its prime?
a little bit of co-op and a little bit of just really liking the community at this point. So would I have gone like a little bit less into StarCraft if I knew that Blizzard was going to cut funding? 100%.
Yeah.
But I also always felt like, and I still feel like I can do a lot in this game and whatever comes next.
What would you say your goals are as a StarCraft competitor?
To win and have as much fun as possible is what I'm aiming at.
That's a great
But
goal.
especially after the last home streak up, like that one was probably the best event I've been to, like as a player. The DreamHacks are obviously like, especially the last one, the summer one was super hardcore because it was just like a lot of the seeded players got straight into the round of 16, round of 8. So it was just me against creator in like the third round I played. So it was just really hard
Yeah.
to really play. Like, I mean, you don't get to play on stage. You just play a couple matches on the PC. We did play a BYOC there too, but that was against like Arrowfire, Fiant, and then I played DNS in the final. I beat him in the upper bracket, and then I lost in the final.
Well, that's a decent accolade in and of itself. I feel like DNS is a relatively high level player.
Yeah, I think so too.
That's cool. I didn't even know there was a BYOC at Jönköping.
Yeah, I mean it's these ones that you kind of go to because you can win a little bit of money if you
Yeah.
want to. But it was like 900 euro, but it was winner takes all, so
Oh.
got nothing out of it.
Oh, damn. So close to a nice payday.
Mhm.
Well, such is life. But
In Atlanta, I did win both the AOE 4 and SC2 one, so I'm in the on the winning end of the DreamHack BYOCs for now. At least.
sweet. That's great. I knew you, that you won the AOE 4 one. I actually didn't. I knew that there was a StarCraft one, but I actually didn't really follow that one closely enough. That event was insane, though.
Yeah. I think the
Atlanta was
SC2
great.
one actually had a lot of players in it. Like I remember seeing the signups being like upwards of 60, something like that.
That's sweet. So, what would you say at this point separates you from the more like elite European Zergs like Serral, Raynor, Laser? Like, what do you think is different about your game compared to theirs?
Consistency, and one thing that I've been trying to work on, and some people have pointed out, is just like I like to click a lot, and sometimes those clicks are not what I should be doing, and especially like sometimes it's tunnel visioning, sometimes it's just like having a bad day, so I'm just not focused enough and stuff like that. It's just like being a little more consistent and also a little bit less afraid of adapting is one thing. For a while, I tried to play super perfect, but it's just like putting so much work on me that it might just get changed by a balance patch or any like map pool change or whatever. It's like there's too many variables to actually put into like perfecting your StarCraft. You just have to do that. You have to start from the ground up and then just build until you can be better than a 6K player and then better than a 6-2, 6-4. Like I think that's a way better approach than just trying to play like Serral on the from the get go.
Yeah, yeah. I think trying to play like Serral from the get go is maybe a recipe for disaster. I'm sure it's much more of an iterative improvement sort of thing.
Yeah, but because I did that at first, I really think I have like very good mechanics if I can just get them to put them to actual use. Like Rotti always comments on my games is that sometimes I play like insanely well, and then other times it's just like what am I even doing?
Do you think it's like a
I'm
nerves
losing
issue or just
3
focus?
Vipers because I'm controlling 7 different link drum control groups, stuff like that.
No, that makes sense. Spreading yourself a little too thin in terms of in-game attention. Do you think there's a nerves element of it for you as well, or do you think it's mostly just focus?
Well, I used to get like pre-tilted already. There was a time when I still before I moved out last spring. No, the year before. So 2022 spring last year, I moved out, and then from there it got a lot better. Like I used to be really nervous about either making too much noise late at night or just like if I get a random call or whatever. Like because I lived with my brother and um, either my dad or my mom, and especially my mom's apartment. It was like 2-room house, so my brother was next to me, and then if someone would randomly come through the door, that would be a bit distracting. And stuff like that kind of made me a little bit nervous because I felt like I had like untapped potential. So it already tilted me that I couldn't like play to my best just because of the conditions a little bit. But for nerves, they've gotten better now, especially because I feel like the stakes are a little bit lower, realistically. So I'm not like over stressing. Like even though DreamHack qualifiers are in 2 weeks, I'm not like looking at my schedule in a way where I'm just super nervous. Part of that is because I got a pretty big confidence boost like 2 weeks back. I got a map of max packs, beat some other good guys. My Aligulak rating went up like almost 200, maybe 300. It was a pretty low, honestly, for my current form, I would say, but still, like for nerves, I don't really feel them that much anymore. Only when I'm very close to winning do I start to feel a bit jittery and stuff like that.
That makes sense. Yeah, yeah. I think there's like a rush there of like you think you're about to win, you feel like you're about to win, but then you're scared, like, oh no, like what if I'm gonna make a mistake, or what if my opponent has some stuff that I'm not aware of, or something like that. Yeah, that makes sense. I'm really excited though to see how you perform in these qualifiers. I'm glad that you're feeling strong. Um,
Yeah,
so obviously the latest patch has been, a point of contention for a lot of people. What are your thoughts on the patch?
my thoughts on the patch. I think the early games TVZ might be a bit questionable with the new Cyclone because the kind of forces overloads of the map and also shuts down a lot of the roach pressures. So that's one thing. And honestly, the thing I'm most worried about is just Protoss in ZVP because I already felt they were pretty strong with like late game crown styles. Well, not like ultra late game, but like right before you get to a good setup with Brute Lurker, it's really difficult to play in my opinion. And now you don't have the Bane momentum to shut down a lot of greedy builds. And um, some of the maps look pretty good for Zerg. That's one thing. That's a plus for me, I think. I hope. But yeah, ZVP, just because there's a lot of Protoss players around the level that I want to break through and play at, and CVT early game are my biggest, I would say, concerns.
Well, you did just take a player off maybe the best Protoss player in the world, but I guess that was maybe on the previous
Mm.
patch.
Yeah, that was on the previous patch, and that was, I think he didn't expect what was coming to him. So
Yeah, yeah,
that
no,
was,
sure. I mean, I think it's kind of a mental balancing act, right? Where it's like on the one hand, of course, you're going to be really proud to beat somebody that's amazing at the game, but on the other hand, like taking one map is just a map, right? You know what I mean? Like I think it's you don't want to like I don't know make too much out of it. You know what I mean? Like, but I think it is really good to for your like you said, it was a confidence boost for you, and I think that's really important.
yeah. I mean, I just mentioned the one map, but
Yeah, yeah,
more it was that I had a couple of good results after that. Like that was just the first one that I remember, and
yeah,
then
yeah.
on the first 1 or 2 weeks after that, I also got a lot of nice wins. And that was like right after, at the end of August, I was feeling really demotivated. I just didn't feel like playing much. So I really got into it like right after I started playing a bit more again. Then I got those wins, and it's nice.
Yeah. How do you feel about balance right now in the game?
I mean, I think that's kind of what I think. What I just said.
Yeah.
I think CVP might be too tough for Zerg now, but TVZ, as long as you don't let them get there, it's probably still fine. But the early game might become too difficult if they start going too greedy with some openers, and then Zerg's being too afraid to punish it because it's really like the amount of safety you get from never having to lift up the reactor factory is a lot. Because the builds look the same. You can still make 6 Hellions, but if you mix in one Cyclone, you just can clear all the Overlords. As long as it's the Zerg, like Zerg can't have the Overlords in front of creep that they would usually have. So you have less reaction time to Hellion run bys, less just map awareness and stuff like that.
Yeah, that's definitely challenging. Where you feel sort of boxed in to your part of the map. Yeah, I think that's never really where you want to be as Zerg.
Yeah, I don't think the Cyclone itself is broken. Like I think once you go into the mid game, then they are probably worse than the old Cyclone.
Hmm. Well, that's an interesting balance. I'm curious to see how people adapt to this, and if it ends up being a real problem that has to be reverted, in the early game and things of that nature or not. It's I as much as people, I mean, some of the other elements of just like the rollout of this patch obviously have been really weird and questionable, but um,
I was, I was joking about that. The night when they patched, I was just like, they're probably gonna forget to patch even Asia. But I already went to bed before the usual patch times because it's always a bit later in Europe when they patch, like 2 a.m. something like that.
sure.
And then they just didn't patch it. And I know when they're trying to patch it, but that's still gonna be a couple days.
Still, yeah, it's multi-billion-dollar company. You think they'd be able to
Small indie
upload a
company,
patch?
have
Yeah, yeah,
too
yeah,
much
tiny
pressure on
little
those
indie
guys.
company. Yeah. I mean, yeah, I mean, listen, the StarCraft 2 team probably is representative of a tiny little indie company, whatever the StarCraft 2 team even looks like now. I don't even know. But
Yeah,
oh, sad stuff, honestly, but is what it is, I guess. So you share a home country with arguably the greatest player ever. Was that a significant inspiration for you, Yuna's success over the last 6 years?
yeah, for sure. I don't think I mean, he helps me with a lot of stuff as well. So I think it's a big part of why I still want to play. And more recently, that's also about a lot of the community and home stray cups and other events that I really like hanging out with. But for a while, it was just pretty much Serral and some of the other people like Zukaliang and Fuser used to host events for SC2 as well. So it used to be more the Finnish community. Now it's still the Finnish community once a year. But and whenever like Divinisha is a big part of the Finnish community as well. He always casts regionals. But with Serral, yeah, for sure. I think it's a big inspiration. Obviously, you can see it in my style. Like what I talked about at first, it was just like trying to play really perfect, and that's what he did in 2018. Like it was much less um, trying to uh, out gimmick or whatever, yeah, like win with strategies than it is now with his play, and more just like playing ultra solid into a 15-minute win.
Yeah, yeah, no, and to a certain extent, I think from a viewer perspective, that can almost be boring, right? Somebody just like playing perfectly and just swatting away all the aggression, and then eventually outgrowing the opponent. But when you look at it from with a more mechanical understanding, it's incredibly impressive what he was able to do. And I think the envelope has really continued to get pushed from there as well. I think, like obviously maybe not to the same level, but a lot of people have been able to sort of um, build their play in a similar way, right? Where it's all about maybe not executing it as perfectly as he does, but really designing your game around that, right? Like playing as perfectly as possible and not relying on gimmicks. It seems like the game has moved. I feel like there's a lot less aggressive all-in type strats than there were like let's say 6 to 8 years ago and prior to that. Would you agree
Yeah,
with
I
that?
think so. Yeah, but I also think he was part with Legacy coming out
Yeah,
and then refining that more because obviously starting with 12 workers pushes you outside of that, which I like. I really don't think you should be gambling in the first 2 minutes of the game to like game winning degree. Sure, it's exciting to have some like random moments, but when you go into this qualifier like the one in 2 weeks and you have two open single elimination open bracket qualifiers and each one of those is best of three into a best of five final. Like imagine you have to gamble against someone who's 5-5 or like 700 mmr lower than you. It's just gonna feel terrible if you lose.
of course.
And I think that's like the best part about RTS is the mastery. It's just like the difference between a lot of the top players and even someone like me is pretty ridiculous. And it's just what's motivating is that you might be super consistent if you get to that point. And like I said before, is that I managed to tune that mindset down a little bit. I'm not like trying to be exactly sterile anymore. I'm more just like going week by week, month by month, just trying to win as much as possible.
I think that's a very very healthy level-minded take on it. It's yeah, it's all just an iterative improvement. I think if you constantly compare like even for myself, right? If I constantly compared myself to the biggest creators in the game, to Loco and Pig and stuff like that, I'd feel pretty crummy about myself because obviously they pull huge numbers because they've been doing this forever and they're really good at what they do. Um, but on the flip side, yeah, I just like to focus on, just week by week, who am I going to talk to? What kind of stories am I going to get to share? And I think it's the same for a pro player.
Yeah, I think so. And that's
Um,
some like one thing that's a bit difficult about being a StarCraft player at this level sometimes is how many or how little there is to play in sometimes. Like people say that there's a ton of tournaments, but then it's like the amount that of tournaments where you actually feel like your time is relatively worth to put into it is not too many. Where it used to be even a couple years ago, you used to have the spring qualifier or the summer qualifier, then fall, then winter, and now it's just summer into winter. And you have the LAN event in between, but you have to pay it yourself to get there.
Yeah.
It's not as intense as it used to be, and it's also one thing I wish they did at some point would be like a seeding event for people who aren't regularly in the DreamHack events. Because the thing is that if I didn't go to these live events, I would have like almost 0 EPT points just because I need to beat Gabe in the EPT cups like 5 times to catch up with someone who got points from the Oceania region or whatever. So it's just um, I would have liked to see a bit more regular competition, just for the sake of competition. Even like as long as it feels official, it's fun to play. The
Oh, for
$50
sure.
cups are fun to play for Aligula rating, but when you play against the same guys 500 times and never some new people, it doesn't feel like you're improving as much because you can expect what they and it doesn't feel like competition as much as it feels like clocking it at work sometimes.
Yeah, no, I hear that. I've always like toyed around with the idea of like, I mean, this is sort of just a pipe dream, but like having events for where people who have won like major premier titles can't compete, something like that, right? Like I always thought that that's a really interesting concept. Like if you could put some real money up on the line to give players who are not, like well established champion level players in the game like something to get excited about and work toward. And I think it's interesting, right? Because then if a player wins that event, maybe they can't compete in it anymore. I don't know. It's just kind of a random idea, but it's something I thought about a lot, especially in Korea, right? Like years ago, because that was the biggest problem in the Korean scene is that there was never any new talent. Like the old players retired, and then the guys who stuck around, like we have players that are still competing from 2011, 2012 era, in Korea, and there's been maybe 5 or 6 new high level competitors that scene has produced. Europe doesn't have that problem as much. Like there's been a pretty good crop of young talent over the years, because the game is still pretty popular in Europe. But yeah, I don't know. It's just like when you mentioned that sort of thing of like there's basically two different types of tournaments for you, right? Like ones where you play against the best of the best, most premier players, and obviously that's something you want to work at to be able to compete more directly with some of those guys. But until you get there, it's pretty challenging. And then on the flip side, there's very small $100 cups where you're just playing against the other people that are close to you on the ladder, or maybe a bit below. And you sort of if like you said, it doesn't feel like exciting competition. It feels like clocking into work.
Mm. Yeah,
Um,
at this point it's like kind of whatever, but
yeah,
I would have felt like something like this would have been really nice to have like 3 years ago
yeah, yeah,
because then you still had the 3 DreamHack online seasons because of COVID, but in between those qualifiers, and these qualifiers will be like 1 week. You have 2 open qualifiers. If you don't make it to close, you play like a couple best of threes. It doesn't feel like you really get to test a lot of stuff against most of the players. And even at that point, you had a bunch of people who already like half retired, so they would show up a couple weeks before, play a little bit on ladder, and then stomp out a lot of like players like me because they just had the experience and the solid like they don't get nervous in those events. I would still get super nervous sometimes. So it was just I felt it was really difficult, especially because SC2 I was always very conservative with the balance changes. So you wouldn't feel too unfamiliar coming in, like missing a few months of practice.
yeah. I think it really depends on the player. I think some players like need the consistent practice to be in any kind of good form, but then there have always been some players that just like they built up their skill set maybe years ago, but they can just turn it on, yeah, like you said, in a few weeks and just be at that competitive level again. So yeah, I can imagine that's kind of frustrating to to battle up against. But
Yeah.
um, okay, so that's a bit negative. But on a positive note, we seem to be entering into a pretty cool and like exciting era for real-time strategy fans, right? There are a number of titles on the horizon. I think perhaps the foremost of which is Stormgate. How do you feel about that? Like, are you really interested? Do you see yourself playing it competitively?
I'm interested, and I do see myself playing it competitively, but I still I'm like um, I'm looking at it. I still need to actually see how my life looks like in a year
Yeah.
whenever they get it to like public early access, which is when I imagine they want to start running some kind of events. And obviously, then streaming is public as well, so you can have those other opportunities. But I feel like they've made a lot of more progress recently. For a while, it was like um, it looked like it was like just mediocre to me. I mean, I was at when I first heard about Frost Giant, I was very excited, and then I see the stuff. I was just like a little bit excited, and now I'm feeling a little bit more confident again. And I really hope they keep this momentum up. Like for example, the last dev update they did like a week ago, I think that was really cool, and they improved a lot from even the Gamescom reveal that they had with the Infernals. And I really hope they keep, especially to RTS people, they keep pushing that kind of like half marketing, half like just being part of the community.
Yeah.
And then I'm looking forward to seeing what they can do with a polished product later on.
Absolutely. Yeah. I think myself and many other people are kind of on the same page. Just cautiously optimistic, right? Like we want this to be great, but we don't want to get all our hopes pinned up in something that's not here yet.
Yeah.
But what about other titles like Zero Space or Tempest Rising? Have you put any like thought into those? Do you think you're interested, or you don't know so much about them?
I know about all of these. As I said, I played like so many different random RTS games over the years. Like there was an Iron Harvest tournament at one point, Crossfire Legion last year. I played a lot of these smaller ones. So yeah, I'm aware. Um, Tempest Rising, I think, is more single player oriented. So I'm not really, unless they really want to post up like an invitation or whatever, then I'm not too much looking into engaging with the competitive side of that.
Sure.
But Zero Space is also like it feels nice at this point to have more like options on the horizon. Even if a lot of these games were small, I would still like play them on the side while working a regular job, which I would probably do anyway in
Yeah.
Stormgate. But so it's nice to have like more because I think it can only be a positive unless it's just like if it was because we have a relatively big developer with Frost Giant. If it was only indie and a bunch of different random RTS, then I would feel like it would be better if they just collaborated. But with Zero Space and Stormgate, I feel like they're big enough to feel like a real game and have some kind of competitive potential, even if it isn't like a decade or 2 decade worth. But yeah, I'm looking forward to Zero Space and Stormgate. With Stormgate obviously being a lot more active and closer to release, I think. But we'll see how it goes.
Yeah, in terms of release dates, I think it's hard to say. Like, I agree. I think it seems like Stormgate should be the one that comes to market first, but who knows? I guess where are at in development, with some of the other titles.
Mhm.
But yeah, I think I'm very much on the same page with you. I think it really can't be anything but positive. A lot of people have some negativity. They kind of view it as like one game is going to kill the other or cannibalize the audience of the other, and I don't know. I don't really see that. Like, yeah, I did have that mindset at first. When Stormgate first got announced, um, I thought, okay, well, this is StarCraft 2 is already in a rough place. Like, if this game becomes popular, StarCraft is really going to be done. But I don't know. I've had a bit of a mind shift change in that, especially with other titles being announced over time. And
Mhm.
I think my thought process has been such that like right now, StarCraft I think is kind of a hard game to sell to people, to like new people in the genre, or in terms of players or advertisers, and from a business perspective and stuff like that, because it's like, okay, well, there's one game that anybody really plays in this whole genre, and then Age of Empires came out, and then it was sort of two, but Age of Empires is really different and very separate. And so yeah, I think StarCraft 2 doesn't look very attractive when it's just like, okay, well, there's this game that is smaller than it's ever been, and nobody's developing in this genre, but I think it really is a significant mindset shift where it's like, okay, no, now StarCraft 2 is sort of like the biggest game right now in a genre that is exciting and that people are pouring money into, and that like can see growth and explosion. And I think these new titles like Stormgate and Zero Space and theoretically Tempest Rising, depending on like if they really have a competitive scene or not, will pull more people into the RTS genre as a whole, right? Like I think each of these games, new games, is really focused on accessing communities that are not just the StarCraft community. And I have a hard time thinking that like you know a certain percentage of people that start with these new games are not also going to go, oh wow, StarCraft's really similar to Stormgate, then I really like Stormgate, so perhaps I'll give StarCraft a try. Like I don't think that that's such a huge logical leap. I think that the problem's going to come down to whether or not we see any like real active development with StarCraft going forward. Like if we see one patch every 8 months and nothing else, yeah, like it might not seem as attractive to new players. But I think the real question is going to be what Microsoft does, right? Like if Microsoft sees this sort of focus and revitalization of the RTS community, perhaps we will see active development of StarCraft 3, and perhaps we will see some reinvestment into StarCraft 2. So I think the future
Mm.
is pretty promising for the first time in a long time in this community.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, right now I've kind of locked in on the next 2 months, to be honest. I just don't really. I'm trying to progress my like personal stuff a little more. So I'm not. Um, Before the Stormgate announcement, I was like thinking a lot more about what's happening next year. But now, right now, I'm just trying to be a little bit more on the moment and just trying to do my best. But when it comes to the RTS, like scene as a whole, I think it might be a little bit too utopian to think that every RTS is gonna have the equal level of success and that StarCraft 2 won't decline after every like hopefully better games come out.
Yeah.
But I my point was that I think every RTS that's like with a relatively big budget and good developers is just gonna boost the scene and especially boost the streaming and engagement part of things. So that obviously helps a lot of the more elite core part of the community, like myself and a lot of the casters. And just having stuff to do is so much better than being with SC2 and barely holding on with ESL support, basically. And I really do think that will be fair, and I hope that it happens that Microsoft does something eventually. Maybe next year, maybe at some point. I don't know. But like the dream would be obviously if they support it a little bit next year until we can bridge the gap into whatever comes next.
Yeah, and like I said, I don't think it seems too unrealistic. Like I think, especially if they express interest internally with producing StarCraft 3, I think supporting StarCraft 2 until that happens is like the clear choice, right? Like you want to build up the StarCraft 2 audience because obviously those are going to be the people that transition to StarCraft 3. And they've dropped a lot of sort of hints and like nods to StarCraft, like since the talks of this acquisition. Like, um, it's funny because it's really small things, and I feel like sometimes maybe you're making too much out of it because it's something that you want, but yeah, like they featured StarCraft in some of the art that they put out during the announcement of the merger or the acquisition, whatever. And then obviously that video that sort of went a semi-viral recently of I don't even know who she was, but some executive or developer at Microsoft specifically name dropped StarCraft as a title they're interested in reviving. And yeah, I think uh, Microsoft has obviously already expressed and invested a ton of money in RTS when it comes to Age of Empires. They rented out castles for tournaments and did lots of stuff that they didn't have to do. So clearly they do want to support this genre. So yeah, like I'm cautiously optimistic. Yeah, I think that's sort of the
Yeah.
best way to put it.
There was a Twitter saga, I think last year, early last year, where Microsoft was tweeting about like StarCraft or the Microsoft Xbox CEO, and also the current Blizzard president was also tweeting about it. But it might be PR only, but we'll see.
Yeah, I mean, I think
Um, yeah.
I don't think PR only makes a lot of sense because like it's not like the most gigantic scene. So like, you know what I mean? Like you're really only exciting a small percentage of people in the overall Blizzard ecosystem, and um, I also think it's just one of those titles that isn't getting any love at the moment. You know what I mean? That was such a big part of the Blizzard identity. You know, I think there was time periods where it was the biggest game, right, in for Blizzard, and so yeah, it doesn't make a lot of sense to me to throw away this IP. Like
No.
I think StarCraft is still very much a part of the cultural zeitgeist, right? You know, like people who don't know any, like who aren't into StarCraft at all, they still know about StarCraft. They still have heard of a Zerg Rush, you know, there's this cultural familiarity, and
Yeah.
I think the potential for a StarCraft 3 to be a very big game like StarCraft 2 was is very real. I don't think that it's gonna like, oh, it's gonna flip the industry and take over MOBAs and FPS games and whatever. Like obviously that's a little crazy, um, but I think that there like there is interest in this genre. Like there is an audience. We're crowdfunding StarCraft 2 tournaments. They raised $500,000 for Zero Space. You know, Frost Giant got $34 million in investment when they made the company. Like, I don't think this. Yeah, I think this genre is set to see a real bounce back. Um,
Mm.
but anyhow, uh,
One point on that is still that like StarCraft is also just an IP. Like for a lot of time, there was like talks about World of StarCraft, and
yeah.
StarCraft Go is especially a big name that they might revive. And I think that would be honestly the best call for Blizzard would be to make a shooter with the StarCraft universe. But and they actually wanted to do that at one point, but then it got canned. But then obviously a lot of the stuff with Blizzard came up with insane like drama and mismanagement and
Yeah.
everything. So obviously, I think the way Blizzard handled that StarCraft, even if they reduced their investment by 50%, it was just 100% like mismanaging the product and everything. That so it had to be like a net loss just to even cut developers off StarCraft. I truly believe that.
Oh yeah, absolutely. I mean, there's been a ridiculous amount of misjudgment and mismanagement from Blizzard over the last like 6 to 8 years. Like, the soul of the company is just shifted. You know, like Blizzard was the golden child of the gaming industry. They came out with one hit after the other, and were so celebrated. You know, it was so big and so successful. They had their own convention that was freaking sold out. You know, like that's special. And yeah, people's perspective is completely different on them now. Obviously, because of these crazy allegations and controversies and stuff, but also just because the way that they've treated interacted with their community has changed a lot. Like it's yeah, I felt like a super diehard Blizzard person. Now I feel like, well, I have to tolerate them because they make StarCraft and I like StarCraft.
Yeah,
Uh,
I
yeah,
feel the
it's
same.
very weird. But so a question I had for you and a few other people. So as you see the sort of competitive scene of StarCraft 2, perhaps shrink over the next few years, do you think you see yourself continuing to participate in some level, like just because you like the game, or do you think like if the competitive scene really collapses, that would sort of kill your drive?
I would 100% go to the Finnish SC2 lands, or that we have a yearly one that's always around December, November. Um, if there was one in, well, there obviously like if it collapsed, there would probably be no DreamHack, but I would probably go to like the major stuff. Like if someone hosted an event in the Netherlands or at Take TV, I would probably go. But obviously, I wouldn't practice nearly the same amount if I didn't have like any opportunity to make even a month. Like imagine I put 10 games a day for a month. If I felt like I got $200 for that, no, I wouldn't play. I would just play what I want to play and then have fun with the people
That
and
makes
let
sense.
the good players play. But but yeah, yeah, that's what I think about that.
Yeah, that's a reasonable take. I think for some people they would drop the game completely, and but yeah, I think for a lot of others, they just like the game, you know. So regardless of whether or not there's a competitive scene, maybe they're not going to take it so seriously anymore. But you know, I think like what you just said, like I think there's people in the same boat as you there. Um, so I know that you're a university student. What are you studying these days?
I'm not a university student right now. I've never been a university student. I just finished college. For
You know, I think in the American sensibility, those words are like synonyms. Like, there is a literal difference, I know, but I think sometimes in American English parlance, people tend to sort of, you know, use those words interchangeably. So sorry, yeah. So you're in college, and what is it you're studying?
I just finished. It was programming. I did some C sharp and other programming languages, and yeah, I just finished that one. So I'm happy I got it over with. It got delayed a little bit with COVID, and just be putting it to the side for a little. Not
Oh,
because of gaming, but because of other stuff as well.
sure.
Um, so I got done with that. So I'm trying to look for some opportunities in programming, and the nice part about that is there's a wide variety of stuff I can do. I can even do stuff myself. If I really want to put something up for Stormgate or even like my personal daily stuff or for my friends, it's a nice thing to have. It's like kind of like if you're good at woodworking, but just digital.
Oh,
I
that's
think
really
it's
cool.
really cool. But yeah, I'm basically gonna see where that takes me, and if it doesn't take me anywhere, then I'll reconsider what I want to do. But yeah, that's my
So
situation right now. I just finished school, and I'm just that's why I'm also like looking for the next 2 months because I just really don't know what I want to do next.
makes sense. I'm
It's a
glad
big
that
deal.
you know, you were able to complete that, and hopefully the next step goes well. So do you think now that you're finished, like that you're gonna sort of spend some time dedicating yourself to esports full time, or you're still trying to just figure that out, or
Mm,
what do you think the plan is?
unless some crazy opportunity comes up, I don't think I can play full time. But I'm just gonna play as much as I feel like is reasonable. And yeah, I mean, it's a bit more freedom in my mind at least, so I can. It's a bit more relaxing than having deadlines and stuff. So
For sure. Um, well, that's about all I've got for you. You know, it was a lot of fun talking. Do you have any closing words?
no, well, I want to thank the fans, I guess, and also shout out to my team with Berserker Esports. I've been with them for since the WTL uh, last season of WTL. So I really like the guys there. It's a nice atmosphere. So I just wanted to give a shout out to those guys, and also shout out to the Finnish community, Divinisha, for casting all the events, and the organizers. They know who they are, who organize these Finnish lands, and I guess thanks to Joona for helping with stuff.
Fantastic. It's great to see a lot of appreciation of the folks who, you know, sort of helped you get where you're at. Um, but yeah, thanks for coming on.
Thank you.
Thanks so much for watching. If you've been enjoying my work, be sure to get subscribed so you don't miss out on future releases with the biggest names in RTS.